If you're born today into a low-income family in some of the major economies of Europe, do you know when your descendants will finally reach the average income? In 150 years. This is not hyperbole, it's the official statistic of the OECD. In these countries, if you belong to the poorest 10% of the population, it takes 5 or 6 generations to steadily reach the national average income and make significant jumps in social class. That means today's poverty is not a temporary condition. It is a statistical ballast that requires a century and a half to be worked off. But it's not only a matter of money. According to the Global Social Mobility Report, having a low level of education in Europe costs you on average 6 years of life expectancy. If we look at the extremes in the United States between the super rich and the poor, that gap reaches as much as 15 years. There's only one point. Our postal code and the family we're born into are deciding our health more than our DNA. We decided to make this report not to demoralize, but to understand the real mechanisms that allow or prevent a person from changing their fate. We will travel through 3 opposing models of society that coexist in Europe right now to answer these questions. Does work really no longer pay like it used to? Is it true that school, instead of uniting people, is creating new castes? And above all, is there still a place on our continent where you can start from zero and reach the top? Welcome to Amazing Europe. If we look at the social mobility map drawn by the World Economic Forum, an anomaly immediately jumps out. Countries like Italy and Spain, nations that pride themselves on universal welfare systems, are dramatically lagging. Italy, in particular, sits in 34th place, overtaken by nations that, 30 years ago, were emerging from Soviet rubble, such as Lithuania or Estonia. How is this possible? To explain it with an image, we can say these nations resemble medieval castles. The social structure here has been designed, consciously or not, to protect those already inside the walls and keep out those pressing at the gates. It's not malice, it's economic architecture, and it stands on 3 pillars. The first element is the walls, that is, the war between income and wealth. For decades, the European social bargain was simple. If you work hard and earn a decent salary, you can buy a home and accumulate wealth. Today, that bargain is worthless. The World Economic Forum report shows a global phenomenon that takes on especially worrying contours here. Wages have stagnated, while asset values, returns, real estate, have exploded. Let's give a practical example. Take 2 people. Marco earns €3,000 net a month, an excellent salary in Italy, but he starts from scratch and must pay rent in Milan or Rome. Luca earns €1,500, but lives in the house he inherited from his grandmother. On paper, Marco is the rich one. In reality, Marco will never accumulate wealth as quickly as Luca. The cost of real estate assets has decoupled from real wages. The walls have become so high that earned income can no longer vault over them. That, in practice, explains the 6-generation figure we mentioned at the start. Note, we are not saying it's impossible to make it in a single lifetime. There are entrepreneurs and exceptional talents who beat this statistic every day, but the data tell us that, on average, the system is now structured so that the effort of one life is no longer enough to close the gap with those who already own assets. But the report reveals a detail that makes this situation even more unjust, and it is hidden between the lines under the heading Social Protection. If we analyse how the state spends its citizens' tax money, we uncover an astonishing paradox. On paper, Italy spends record-breaking amounts. The report awards it the maximum score, 100 out of 100, for the volume of resources it mobilises each year to protect its citizens. But here lies the deception. If we look at how that money is actually used to create opportunity, the system collapses, because that mountain of money does not go toward greasing the gears of the social elevator. It goes almost exclusively toward financing the past, pensions, and the protection of acquired rights. By contrast, when the report analyses how much the state invests to help a young person gain skills or find a better job, Italy sinks to the bottom of the European rankings. In practice, the state takes resources from the work and sweat of the young to safeguard the stability of those who have already crossed the finish line. Let us be clear, we are not saying pensions are wrong. They are a pillar of civilization. We are saying the data reveal a fatal imbalance. We have designed a fiscal system that functions as a mechanism of preservation. We tax the dreams of those starting from zero to guarantee the security of those already inside the castle. In this system, work is no longer the tool to become wealthy, but merely to survive. Those with real money live off returns. Those without it work an entire life without ever catching up to those who started ahead. But let's assume Marco wants to try anyway. This is where the second obstacle comes into play, the drawbridge. We're talking about the quality of employment contracts. Italy and Spain suffer from a pathological dualism. The labour market is split into two teams. On one side are the insiders, often over 50, with ironclad contracts, maximum protections, and careers built in an era of growth. On the other side are the outsiders, young people trapped in an endless cycle of internships, sham self-employment, and temporary contracts. And this isn't just an end-of-month pay problem, it's a structural financial problem. The banking system of Southern Europe is extremely conservative. Without a solid contract, banks won't extend credit. And without credit, you can't buy the assets that are the only real source of wealth accumulation. The drawbridge stays up. Those inside are protected. Those outside wait. And often, the only way to lower that bridge isn't talent, but a parental asset guarantee. Again, it's not merit that gets you in, it's family. The consequence? Talented people without guarantees simply leave. Youth emigration is not a lifestyle choice. It's the rational response to a bridge that never comes down. Finally, there is the most insidious obstacle, the one talked about least because it's more technical, yet which takes a whole section of the report, Pillar 10. The guards. The technical term used in the report is opportunity hoarding. Many think Southern Europe's problem is illegal corruption, the bribe. Of course that exists, but the real brake on social mobility is legal corruption. We're talking about barriers to entry into professions. Take notaries in Italy as an example. Someone might object, but you get in by public competition. Anyone who studies can win. It's pure meritocracy. True on paper, but look at reality. To become a notary, you need more than a degree. You need years of full-time postgraduate study, expensive specialist schools, and often many attempts before you get through the extremely narrow competition funnel. Who can afford to study until they're 30 without earning a euro? Only those with a solid family behind them. The son of a factory worker, however brilliant, often has to start working immediately after graduation. He lacks the financial time to attempt the climb. The exam is open to all, but the path to get there selects by wealth, not only by merit. A similar mechanism applies to taxi licenses, pharmacies, or seaside concessions. Here, the barrier isn't study, it's capital. Limited licenses or ones passed down from father to son, costing hundreds of thousands of euros on the private market. In a free market, if there is demand for services, supply increases and prices fall. Obviously, this doesn't happen only in Italy. But bear in mind that in some European countries the state pays you to study, while in the United Kingdom or the United States many of these corporatist barriers do not even exist. In the Mediterranean castle, supply is artificially limited by guilds. These are the guards. They don't tell you you can't enter, they tell you you can enter only if you can afford the admission ticket. The combined effect is devastating. The best jobs in society aren't awarded to the single most talented person, but to the most talented among those who could afford to compete. Don't get me wrong, this system guaranteed great social stability for years. Families acted as shock absorbers, grandparents helped grandchildren, home ownership saved many from poverty. But today, as the savings of older generations erode and inflation bites, the king is naked. We have built societies where to climb, you don't need to run faster. You need the keys to the front door. And here comes the classic objection. Okay, Italy is stuck, but just go north. In Germany or in England, there's real meritocracy. Are you sure? Because if you think the solution is to emigrate to the locomotive of Europe, get ready. We are about to discover that there the system is not fairer, it's just more ruthless. Let's leave the Mediterranean castle behind and take a train north. Destination: Berlin, Frankfurt, London. Here the air changes, the streets are cleaner, employment contracts are firmer, If Italy is the land of who you know, these countries are sold to us as the lands of what you can do, the paradise of efficiency and meritocracy. And yet, if we look at the data in the Global Social Mobility Report, we discover problems even in the heart of Europe. If in the south the elevator is jammed by asset returns, up here it's blocked by an even more ruthless mechanism, the dead-end tracks. I'm talking about the German model, and the point applies almost identically to Austria and, to some extent, to Switzerland. The system is admired worldwide for producing excellent technical workers, but there is a dark price to pay. In that country, an individual's fate is not decided at 18 or 25. Astonishingly, it is often decided at 10. At the end of 4th grade, the school system acts like a sorting hat, brutally splitting children into 3 distinct paths. The most able are steered to the gymnasium, the secondary school that leads to university, while the others are channeled into technical routes that prepare them for work. Now, someone will say, but it's not mandatory. True. In some lender, the school's recommendation is binding. In many others, it's only advice and parents have the final word. But here lies the psychological trap. Statistics show that if a teacher tells a working-class family, your child is not suited to the gymnasium, in 90% of cases that family will follow the advice. Out of fear, the child will fail. Conversely, university-educated families often force gymnasium enrollment despite negative recommendations, paying for tutors and lodging appeals. The result is this: the system takes a snapshot of family inequalities at age 10 and turns it into a de facto sentence. There is one interesting exception: the Swiss model. Their selection is early too, but apprenticeships enjoy very high social status. There, a young person who does not follow the academic track can still become a bank CEO, as happened with Sergio Ermotti, the head of UBS, who began as an apprentice at 15. But elsewhere in Central Europe, sadly, you are not Sergio Ermotti. Once you're on the technical track, jumping to the managerial track is statistically extremely hard. It's a caste disguised as organisation. In Italy, the barrier is the surname. Here, it's the type of diploma you obtained before you even had facial hair. Yet, there is a second, deeper layer of blockage that unites the German case with the one in the United Kingdom, where selection happens through very expensive private schools and elite universities such as Oxbridge. It's not just a question of what you learn, it's a question of who you meet. Social capital. The World Economic Forum report analyses a fundamental detail we often overlook. The researchers explain that mobility is not driven by educational credentials alone, but also by what they call relational assets. Using data from millions of LinkedIn profiles in the United States, a market similar to the Anglo-Saxon model in terms of competitiveness, they demonstrated that those born into high-income families are 3 times more likely to have a network of influential connections. Think about it. What is the real purpose of attending an elite school or a German gymnasium? Is it to learn Latin? No. It's to sit at the desk next to the CEO's child, the politician's child, the head surgeon's child. It's to build that invisible network that 10 years from now will allow you to say, I have a startup idea, I'll call my old classmate who now works at a venture fund. If you separate children at 10, as Germany does, or if you separate them by wealth, as English private schools do, you are destroying the social mix. You are physically preventing the worker's child from befriending the manager's child. In fact, in Germany and the UK, social diversity scores in schools are approximately 20 to 30 points lower than in some Northern European countries. This is what some call social apartheid. There are no signs reading, "No entry for the poor," but there are schools, neighbourhoods and training paths that never intersect. Make no mistake, this system is extremely efficient for the economy. It produces specialised workers who keep the factories of BMW running and managers prepared to run them. But for social mobility, it is a tombstone. Because if you deny the poor the chance to mix with the rich person's network, you condemn them to stay in their enclosure, however clean and well organised that enclosure might be. So, to recap, in the south we have medieval castles, where it's hard to enter if you don't have your grandparents' money. In the centre, we have dead-end tracks, where your career is decided while you still wear short trousers. It seems hopeless. And yet, if we push our gaze further north, toward the cold, or east toward technology, we discover that someone has found the code to hack this system. They are not good countries, they are pragmatic countries. And they have understood something we have forgotten, that talent is a nation's most precious resource, and wasting it is an economic crime. But before we reveal those nations, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to support our project with a like, to subscribe to the channel, and to click the bell so you don't miss our new videos. Thank you very much. Surely, watching the video up to this point, some of you may have said, but all of this is normal. Everywhere, the rich and those with a strong family background have more opportunities than others to climb the social ladder. True, but there are some countries that make this climb less difficult. Our journey takes us where it's very cold, to parts of Northern Europe and the Baltic region, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and the small, surprising Estonia. These countries dominate the social mobility rankings. If you are born poor here, you are not guaranteed to become rich, but you have the highest statistical chances in the world of making it. If in southern European countries, it takes on average 5 or 6 generations for a family in the bottom 10% of the income distribution to reach the national average income. In these countries, it takes only 2 or 3. The weight of your family background is lower here than anywhere else on the planet. Why? Many southern countries think they're socialist, they hand out charity. Wrong. The World Economic Forum report cites them as the perfect example of stakeholder capitalism. They are fiercely competitive market economies, but intelligent ones. They have made an economic calculation that others ignored. Their secret lies not in universities, but much earlier. It lies in Pillar 2 of the report, access to pre-primary education. On page 16, the report is crystal clear. The first 1,000 days of a child's life are the investment with the highest possible economic return. In Denmark, where preschool enrollment exceeds 93%, the state guarantees elite childcare for all. Why do they do it? Not out of kindness. They do it because they know the cognitive gap between a rich child and a poor one emerges before the age of 3. The Nordics think like investors. If a poor child has the talent to become the next Einstein, and we leave that child behind, we are throwing money away. It is better to pay for nursery school today than for unemployment benefits tomorrow. It's efficiency, not charity. But there is a second protagonist, perhaps even more interesting, Estonia. Let's clarify one thing right away. In the overall ranking, the United Kingdom narrowly beats Estonia. Reading the report, it becomes clear that this is for 2 main reasons. It has a long-established healthcare infrastructure, and it is home to some of the best universities in the world. But the real surprise is Estonia. Until 30 years ago, it did not even exist on the map of the free market. Today, it has overtaken European giants and is closing in on the United Kingdom. Although it still has some way to go, by looking at Estonia, we can learn some very important lessons. How did it do it? It used the only weapon capable of dissolving castes at low cost: technology. In the report, Estonia scores exceptionally well in technological access and low corruption. It has digitized 99% of the state. You might say, fine, that's convenient, but what does it have to do with social mobility? It has everything to do with it. Technology acts like an acid that corrodes old power networks. In some European countries, to obtain a permit quickly, you often need relational capital, that friend behind the counter. Paper bureaucracy is the kingdom of favours. In Estonia, your counterpart is an algorithm, and the algorithm doesn't know who your father is. If the procedure is digital, the Prime Minister's child and the bricklayer's child stand in the same queue. By digitising the state, Estonia has taken power away from intermediaries and handed it to neutral processes. It has shown that you do not need centuries of accumulated wealth to create mobility. You simply need the courage to replace the handshake with a click. That is the Northern lesson. Social mobility is not magic, it is social engineering. While some protect the past with walls and tracks, they are investing everything in the future, and the results speak for themselves. We began with a frightening number, 6 generations. But remember, this is a statistical average and a projection. It describes a trend, not a law of physics. The report shows us two concrete lessons. When institutions become more transparent and accessible, and when countries invest early in health and education, social mobility can improve. Estonia is an example of how the digitalization of services can reduce arbitrariness and make procedures more traceable. Denmark and the Nordic countries show what happens when a nation treats childhood as an investment rather than a cost. Social immobility is not an inescapable destiny. It is an architecture. Every European nation today stands at a crossroads: continue protecting the walls of the past, or find the courage to invest in the one resource that never depreciates: untapped talent. Will we die in the same class in which we were born? Not necessarily. Of course, for many people, origins still determine life opportunities, and if we fail to act, that will continue to be the case. But we set the rules of the game every time we refuse to confuse privilege with merit. We must choose carefully which Europe we want to live in. For a more complete picture of the situation, we recommend this video, where you will discover the 10 European nations with the highest number of people at risk of poverty. That's all for today. See you next time.